It's hard to express in words how much I love Realm of the Elderlings, but we're gonna try. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video I'm doing something a little bit different, and I am doing a why you should read or shouldn't read the Realm of the Elderlings series by Robin Hobb. So this is definitely one of those series that while I absolutely love, and I know there are a lot of other people who love as well, I've also heard from quite a few people who do not care for it, usually for very valid reasons. So I want to talk to you today about the reasons why I love this, all of the reasons I think that this is a great series that you should read, but also make you aware of some things that may make this interest you less, or if nothing else, let you know to expect them so that you don't come in expecting something different. Because I do think expectations are really important, and when you have a series like this that is just given so much love, and then you're not really told any of the negatives, you can come in and just feel like you're getting gypped. I've had that happen to me with books and series. I know I've definitely heard people who have started like The Wheel of Time or some Sanderson stuff who've just only ever heard the hype feel disappointed. And so I want to kind of level set while also absolutely, I'm not going to lie, there will be quite a lot of gushing about how much I love this series, but I'm going to try to explain why, like I said in the intro. So first let's talk about what the Realm of the Elderlings is, and try to give kind of a very brief overview, which is a little bit hard for various reasons, but let's start with it. So there are a total of 16 books plus some short fiction in the Realm of the Elderlings. That takes place first with 3 trilogies: the Farseer trilogy, the Life Ship Traders trilogy, the Tawny Man trilogy, and then later on additional books were put out in the series, the Rainwild Chronicles, which is 4 books, and then the Fitz in the Fool trilogy, which is back to the trilogy format, which was otherwise pretty much kind of the norm. So we've got a couple of different things going on as well, because the Farseer trilogy is following Fitz. And Fitz has the Farseer trilogy, the Tawny Man trilogy, and the Fitz and the Fool trilogy. Those are all following Fitz and are narrated by Fitz in the first person. Whereas the other books, the Life Ship Traders and the Rainwilds Chronicles, are going to be third person and do have several point of views. And so that's something that's a little bit different in general, to have different books in the series that are written in different ways. Now, a lot of people will say, usually if they've not read everything, I feel like, but a lot of people will say that you can kind of read different of the trilogies or series independently of the others. I really would not recommend that, because each one really does build off of the previous one and really tie more together, and so you will get the most out of Realm of the Elderlings if you read in publication order. Starting with the Farseer trilogy, we're following Fitz, and he is a young boy who's basically given up to the prince, because he apparently is the bastard child of the king-in-waiting, the oldest prince, and his grandfather gives him up, and then he's brought to court and then kind of just dealing with figuring out how to live in a royal court, kind of growing up and learning things, and also being given some secretive training as well at the same time. And that's kind of the basis of how that's set up. We do start the Farseer trilogy with Fitz being around 6 years old, and then it ends when he is, I think, around 18, if I recall correctly. So there's a lot that happens there. The Life Ship Traders trilogy does jump forward from the end of the Farseer trilogy and has, for the most part, a completely new cast of characters. We're in a completely different area. Most of it takes place in Bingtown, and then the area is much south of there, whereas on the map of the 6 duchies, where the Farseer trilogy takes place, that's just like one tiny little point on the southern end of the map. And so we're really looking at a completely different set of the world, and it has to do with life ships, which are made of wizard wood, and after 3 generations of a family member, basically, die on the ship, it like takes on their memories and then becomes essentially alive. And we're following that path. And then the Tawny Man trilogy goes back to Fitz after a time jump And we then from there explore kind of a plot that pulls the first two trilogies together quite a lot, while also setting up some new stuff as well. So I have actually only read at this point through the Tawny Man trilogy. So why, you may ask, am I making a why you should read video when I have not even finished all of the books in this series? And I will tell you the reason why. Originally, I wanted to wait. That would be a bit because I've been doing a read-along for the last 6 books with Megan's Reading Revelation, her channel, including Andrew and Stephanie and other Stephanie too, that we've been doing that for a while. And we're taking a break for a bit before starting the Rain Wild Chronicles, so it's going to be a bit before I finish it. But I decided to do this video now because the Tawny Man trilogy really did feel like an end to the series. It felt like it was really a hardline end. There's still a lot of stuff that could be explored, and it completely makes sense that Hobb added more books later because there was a ton more to look at. But it really did wrap a lot of things up, and it felt like if that would have been where the series ended, I still think it would have been incredibly satisfying. And so because I read the first 9 books, I do, at this point, I can already completely comfortably say this series is one of my top series of all time. Robin Hobb is one of my top authors of all time. And I was able to get that. Granted, Robin Hobb herself jumped up to those levels when I was in the middle of the 2nd book in Farseer pretty early on, and has really not disappointed me since. So that's the first thing I do want to hit on is, once again, I completely recommend that you read these in publication order. But each trilogy of the first 3 trilogies does tell a complete story, does have a satisfying end, and does leave you with that feeling that while of course there's still more to happen, more to be explored, that you're getting an ending. You read Farseer, it could have ended there. You read Lifeship, it could have ended there as well with what happened, even though there was a ton more. And you read Tawny Man, it really pulled so much together and recontextualized things from those other trilogies. But it also felt like it could have ended there, despite, once again, there being a ton more to tell. So that is something I really want to mention with the structure of this series. It is a series that you can read each entry, and then if you stop there, you're not going to be disappointed or get like cliffhangers. Hobb does such a great job with that. Talking about more specific things about the series, I am going to be doing like as a kind of pros and cons. I actually did take notes for this video because there's a lot of things I want to hit on, and I want to make sure that I get to them. So the first thing I want to mention is the prose. And I know there's a joke in our Discord from CD that if a book is described as beautiful prose, they don't want to read it. But a lot of people do like beautiful prose. I never realized I was a person that really, really appreciated great prose until actually really this year when I read some more stuff that just had fantastic prose, and I really noticed a difference. But Robin Hobb's prose and her writing is just beautiful, especially in the Fitz books. In the Lifeship Traders, it was still really good, but it wasn't quite the same, which was, I believe, a conscious choice because you have Fitz, who at some points is trained as a scribe, which is not a spoiler. This will be spoiler free. But he's narrating everything from later in his life, and so he's used to writing in a very formal way, and so you get that. Lifeship is the different POVs, so things are just expressed a little bit differently. But it is so well written, and Hobb is definitely one of those authors, for me, that even if nothing is really happening, I just enjoy her writing so much that I'm completely okay with that. And I will absolutely just read through passages of not a lot going on. And I'm okay with that. And we're going to get more onto that a bit when we talk about the pacing and the plot structure, things like that as well, so that more will be coming. But the big thing I want to talk about is characters. Because in general, the Fitz books especially, but all 9 so far, these are incredibly emotional, character-driven stories. Now, that can become a problem if you don't like the characters, especially I've heard a lot of people don't care for Fitz. I do think that's understandable. He starts very young, he's very naive, he doesn't always make the best decisions, and Hobb does absolutely love her dramatic irony, where Fitz does not realize things, and you as the reader, things are really, really clear, and you just see him falling into the trap or into just this situation, and you're like, oh no, Fitz, why would you do that? Come on, Fitz, think. And you do have moments like that. So Fitz, though, is a character that I was able to connect with, and he definitely frustrates me sometimes. He definitely does things that are dumb, but he's a pretty, like, his character is pretty realistic for what's happened. And sometimes he can be frustrating, but so can, basically any real person that you meet. So that brings to the point of the characters are very, very flawed. There's no character that is really perfect. Whether we're talking the Fitz books or the live ship books, the live ship books really brought it to the forefront because we got multiple POVs from these very flawed characters, and we had to go through some of them very painfully flawed because Hobb is just fantastic at writing characters that are annoying and or that you hate, but writing them so well and so believably. So there are definitely characters, Malta, in Live Ship, who I really didn't like reading her passages because I'm just like, I just wanted to just like give her a smack. Like, come on. She was so annoying and was like, a preteen to teen girl, so it kind of made sense. But she writes the characters really, really well. And the characters are so complex. Even, our protagonists that we're following, whether it's Fitz, who will fully admit his flaws, or in Live Ship, all of our protagonists are very flawed. We have Althea, and it has quite a lot of flaws. All of the Vestrits in general really, really do. They're very flawed, and they're trying to get by in the world. And we have even more flawed characters, and we have villains, and all of them, just basically do seem to be like real people. You don't necessarily get characters always making choices that you feel like what you want them to do. You get characters that are making realistic decisions because they're flawed individuals, and Hobb does make the characters feel so real to me as well. I feel like these are real people, and the settings are very, very different because you have the Six Duchies, which it feels much more feudal, medieval, versus Bingtown, which is more like kind of like Renaissance, but feels like it'd be like a Downton Abbey set type thing. Very, very different lifestyles and settings, even though they're not that far apart. It's just two very, very different areas, and the settings work really well with the characters as well, and seeing all different kinds of people. There's just so many great characters. I really can't name them all, either of the ones that I love and the ones that I hate. But Fitz is a character I very much enjoy. The Fool, of course, who's another really big character, is one that I really enjoy. But even characters like Malta that I mentioned, there is a ton of character growth, is the thing, too. Malta I hated in the first book, and by the end of the second book in Life Ship Traders, I didn't hate her anymore. By the third book, I'm still like not a favorite character of mine, but the growth was so fantastic, I actually started to enjoy her parts much, much more. And that's pretty impressive to do in a trilogy, to introduce a character and have you hate them and then slowly make them grow and build them to where you don't anymore. And I was just so impressed with the way that Hobb can write that. Well, the characters have really complex relationships with each other as well. That is, I want to say, it's hard to even say which it's more so in, because the Fitz books, his relationships with pretty much everyone are complicated because of the circumstances of his birth, because of his own actions, and because of things that happen later that just muddy the waters even more. So there's quite a lot in the Fitz books that you get tension and you get these just gut punch moments because of his strained relationships with people, or because of his good relationships with people. A lot of it's done there. And you get a ton of that in the Live Ship Traders as well, where all of these different people have very complex relationships. Some of it's the romances, and there's still a romance in Live Ship Traders I just did not like. It's a lot of people apparently do. I just felt like it was very toxic and just started weird and had other really big red flags. But that's life. It's messy, and I'm sure we've all seen people we know in our own lives be in a bad relationship, and you're like, why are you doing this? It seems so obvious to me that this is wrong. But people got to make their own mistakes, and that really happens there as well. You get a lot of that complexity, and I've alluded to just a little bit, but the villains, the freaking villains, I don't know that I've ever found someone who can make me hate people more than Robin Hobb, because she writes such great villains. There are just a lot of them. You do get somewhat of a type of the hateable characters who are like spoiled nobles. So that's definitely something that is a recurring theme. You get that in both the Fitz books and the Life Ship books. But you have characters like Regal and Galen in Farseer, and you have characters like Kenneth and Kyle in the Live Ship Traders that are just, oh my gosh, they're so hateable. But the thing that I love is no matter how detestable the character is, no matter how terrible they are or what they do, there are some characters who do awful, awful things to other people. And even then, Hobb never just makes it so that, oh, they're just 100% evil, they're mustache twirling mean, and just they're cruel for the fun of it. No, there are always reasons. Some of them that are actually really understandable as well. And it definitely comes to, because like I felt this way too, like, you know, there'll be reasons that come out later as to why somebody acted the way they do. I'm like, I don't care. I still hate them, but the fact that there's more to it. Even the villains are very complex. It's not just like we're bad, we're evil for whatever, no reason. It's there are really deep reasons, and that's something that is explored. For example, I'll go to in the Live Ship Traders, Kyle. Without going into any spoilers, Kyle is a character who just kind of thinks he knows best and that nobody else knows what they're talking about. And he is just very, very easy to hate. And I mean, his name's even Kyle, it just kind of works. But he's very, very easy to hate. And he definitely does a lot of things that make him deserve your hate. But in the first book especially, Hobb also gives you so many reasons to be like, I hate this guy, he's a dick, but I see where he's coming from. And so I kept getting that. And I'm like, he's going about things in a terrible way, and the way he's communicating things are awful, but he's making some good points, and some of the things were real, and I still hate him a lot, and completely did throughout the series, but there were reasons behind it. You get the same thing with another person who's more of, I guess, an antagonist necessarily, but Captain Kenneth, who does a lot of terrible things, and a lot of them seem inexcusable, but you find out more, and there are reasons behind everything. So I really enjoy that, because Hobb manages to do the thing which I think is really satisfying, is just give you a purely hateable villain that you just like can unconditionally hate, but then she makes you stop and think about it, and you still, so you get a complex villain, but you also still get somebody who just hates, because sometimes it's just fun to have that kind of villain. I know morally gray characters are a big thing right now that's really popular in grimdark and fantasy in general. And Hobb will still give you, like, there's a ton of gray. Like, you'll still get, like, good and bad people. There's a lot of gray, even though they do still have their definitive sides. They're not, like, smack dab in the middle, but it's just that there's good and bad, but there's a whole lot of in between. There are good characters who do bad things, there are bad characters who do good things, but everybody has reasons, and that's something I really appreciate. And especially if you're going to write a series like this, which is so character-driven, you have to have them. The other thing with the characters, and I mentioned it a little bit, is just how emotionally gripping these books are. I've never read anybody else, any other author, that has made me feel things like Robin Hobb does. There are so many gut punches. There are so many just heart-wrenching moments in her books. Things that are just incredibly sad. Even the happy parts tend to be kind of bittersweet. And I definitely, after I finish a Hobb book, often I will just kind of have that like book hangover where I'm just like emotionally drained and I just need a break before I read anything else. Sometimes I'll read like a Discworld just to lighten things up. But in the best possible way, Hobb just writes these books that are emotionally draining because they make you feel, and they really, really get you. I'm not really a crier, and I've never read a book that has made me cry, or like watched a movie or TV show either, for that matter. But if there was ever books that were going to do it, it is definitely Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderlings, because they do just like, I feel it like in my soul. She just punches you right in the soul sometimes. Once again, in the best possible way. It's because of how good the writing is, how good the characters are. That's what makes the thing so gripping. Makes these parts so sad, especially sometimes when you can see things coming and you're just kind of like, this whole time you're leading up to it and realizing what's going to happen, but the characters don't. So that's the other part I want to say there. So I've talked a ton about the characters, and I do completely stand by the fact that this is a very character-driven emotionally charged series, but there very much still is a plot, and a lot of the foreshadowing and plot points really come out later, and you realize how much was being set up. So, still being really vague and not spoiling. I've already mentioned that each part of the series, each trilogy of the first three, do build off of each other, and I expect that to continue. Farseer, for a lot of it, you don't necessarily know what's going on. You're mostly just following Fitz. Live Ship was much more plot driven. It was still really based on the characters, but there was a much more clear plot lines going on. But then the Tawny Man trilogy kind of really pulled it all together and exposed the overarching plot that was there the whole time. There were so many things that were recontextualized, especially from Farseer, in the Tawny Man trilogy because of the fact that it was always there, but when you have a first-person narration from somebody, they don't notice everything, they don't think about everything, and you're only getting their point of view, so it's done really, really well. And even with the live ship traders, there was a lot that kind of was more so shown as to why things were happening there as well, and how that ended up relating. The first two trilogies do have some connections, but they feel pretty unrelated in a lot of ways until you get to Tawny Man. That's when things are really, really tied together. So there is a plot. The foreshadowing, the connections, the way Hobb has crafted it is very masterful, in my opinion. And just the all of the little things. I have been told this continues even up to the final trilogy, where there's still more things being revealed or being shown as were there all along and you just didn't know. And the way it is done is just really, really fantastic. Now, the potential con there is the fact that this is very much the Realm of the Elderlings in general, whether you're reading Fitz books or other books, this is slow burn fantasy. It is slow paced. There are definitely times where things aren't really happening and you're just kind of existing in the world, following our characters. Hobb, I have found is pretty standard to have the first 100 or 200 pages not have a lot happen plot wise, but just be exploring the characters, exploring things that are going on, having things happen. And that definitely, I know, can be a negative for some people if you're more plot driven. There is a plot here, but the character study, the slice of life moments, those take up a lot of screen time as well, and sometimes can just honestly be my favorites because it was, for example, when I started up the Tawny Man trilogy, Fool's Errand starts with just kind of really like slice of life. We're just kind of watching a character live. We're seeing their interactions. We're just seeing normal things going on, and it was so beautifully written, and I was so immediately sucked in, despite the fact barely anything was happening. I just didn't mind. I know that's going to bother people more, and so I always do try to warn people too, especially with Assassin's Apprentice, the first Farseer book. It starts very slow. You do have to kind of get used to Robin Hobb's writing style. It does pick up in the second book, Royal Assassin. A lot more happens. Assassin's Quest goes back to kind of the weird, slower pacing, though. It is the longest book, and it is a slower book, so you do have to be okay with that. You do have to have the patience. Things will come. As I've kind of talked about, though, you don't get answers very quickly either. This is a world that's being built slowly. Very well, the world building is fantastic, but it's done slowly and it's done over time. You're not going to get a ton of answers. You're going to continue finding out new things that you just didn't know, not because the author's like, oh yeah, and this is the thing, because once again, especially in the Fitz books, you're following him. You only know what he knows, and he only pays attention to some things. Live Ship Traders did build the world quite a lot more, and then building off of that, we continue to expand outward into the world, seeing different areas, very different cultures, different ways of living, different magic systems. All of this stuff is built out, but it's built out very slowly. And there are still, despite the fact that, like I said earlier, the Tawny Man trilogy feels like this could be very much an end to the series, there are so many unanswered questions. And I imagine this is going to be a series that when you get to the end, there are still going to be a lot of unanswered questions. I don't think this is going to be something where you get the answers to everything. There will still be some mysteries. There will still be some questions, I'm assuming. But that's also a thing too. Some people really want to know the answers. They don't like waiting, slowly reading several books, several sub-series in the total series to find out more. So that is something to be aware of. This is slower. It does build to a lot of things, but it does not do it particularly quickly, and that's just part of the writing style as well. I briefly did mention the magic systems, and I find them very interesting, and they're pretty diverse. All of the magic is extremely soft magic, though, and that is something that I want to be clear about as well, because I know hard magic is a lot more popular these days, and I get why. I typically tend to prefer a hard magic system, just because I really enjoy it, but I also, I found a lot of my favorites use hard magic systems, and a lot of my favorites use soft magic systems, so I think it more so just depends on how well it's done. But we have a couple of different types of magic. And in the Six Duchies books with Fitz, we have the Wit, which is a kind of magic that has to do with the mind, letting you communicate with people. You can give strength to other people, and you can do all kinds of other things. A lot of it we don't know because there's not a lot of knowledge about it, even among the royals, and because Fitz is never really properly trained. Same thing with there's also magic called the Wit, which allows you to communicate with animals and or bond with animals, and that gives us rise also to animal companions, which have the books have some of the best animal companions that there are as well. But also with this magic, we don't know a ton because we aren't following a character who's really been trained. In the Live Ship Traders books, we're actually introduced to even more things and a type of magic that the Elderlings had, Realm of the Elderlings, being the title. And we find out a lot more about it, and it sounds like the Rainwild Chronicles are where we really find more about the Elderlings, so I'm really looking forward to that. But they had other forms of magic, they had all kinds of things that the modern people absolutely don't understand. The point we're at, it really is, people kind of look at it as mythological almost, and so it's one of those things where we don't know a ton of everything, and that's where, like I said, you're not going to get all the answers. But we get these different magic systems. We see there's some other forms of magic as well, which may or may not be related, and it's hard to know. So you do get some answers, but there's still, once again, a lot of it that is really left up to mystery. So that's something just once again to be aware of. But other items here, and I'm trying to wrap up because I know I've been talking for way too long, but I had so much to say. That's why I took notes, so I'd at least hit things. Other things that are just done really, really fantastically include political intrigue. We get a lot of that with the nobility in the Six Duchies, with the nobility and the satrap in Jamila, in Bingtown with the different factions of traders and other people. We have the Chalced states that is always trying to be at war with everybody. We get a lot of the geopolitical turmoil, things going on there. Even with people in the same area as well, there's a lot of unrest in war with outlying areas. We get to see a lot of culture clash because as we're introduced to, there are a ton of differing cultures and places, and we still, even with all that's been revealed in the first 9 books, we still only know a part of the world. There's still other places we know pretty much nothing about. So those are huge things. I very briefly did mention animal companions because the Farseer trilogy does have my favorite animal companion of all time, very, very easily, so you do get some great animal companions from there as well. And then the history is something that I find really interesting, and this is also one of those things I feel like could go either way for people. You do get a lot of history that's delivered. Usually at the start of chapters, you get kind of a writing. Sometimes it's by Fitz, sometimes it's by other scribes, but it's a bit of history, and it's usually going to be relevant to whatever you read in that chapter or relevant to the overall story. Sometimes that's used to tell you, the reader, things before the characters know things, but that's something I know some people may not enjoy. I really, really liked it, just getting all these glimpses into history, into different topics, finding out things that may not even be wholly correct if we already know different from the experiences we've seen, but see how things are worded. You get these coming from different avenues, and it's something I found really fascinating, and it's a great way of kind of starting to build out the world without having to spend a ridiculous amount of time on just doing that. We're kind of doing that while still going about the story and going about these things. So that's another thing I really enjoyed. But like I said, I'm going to wrap this up because I know I've been going for way too long. But like I said, I absolutely love The Realm of the Elderlings. I love Robin Hobb's writing. I can't wait to complete the series. But I hope this has been helpful for giving you all of the reasons, the things that I really love about this series, and also letting you know what to expect on things that may be negatives for you as a reader, depending on what type of reader you are, so that if you do give this a shot, you're not disappointed because you didn't realize it was going to be so slow or that things were going to not be revealed right away. Making things like that really evident, I wanted to just put out there. And so these are the reasons why I think you should absolutely give it a shot reading Realm of the Elderlings, but also the things you should be aware of if you do. Well, if you're still with me, make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the link in the description for a link to the Wizardly Duo Discord if you want to talk Realm of the Elderlings after all of this already, and, or talk about anything really. It's a lot of fun. Definitely check it out if you want to join us there. And of course, if you'd like to see more of my content, make sure to subscribe.